Welcome to Hearths of Myths. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Let the noise of the modern world fade away. The traffic, the notifications, the hum of electricity. Let it all dissolve into a quiet, heavy darkness. We are going back to the beginning. Not the beginning of a story, but the beginning of existence itself. We are traveling back to a time before time was counted, before the sun dragged its chariot across the sky, before the earth was solid underfoot. We are going to the era of the Great Void. Today, we begin the monumental saga of the first being, the scream that tore the silence, the body that became the world. We are speaking of the ancestor of all terrors and all mountains. We are speaking of Ymir. But to understand the giant, we must first understand the nothingness from which he rose. In the cosmology of the North, reality did not begin with a bang. It did not begin with a command. It began with a long, agonizing silence. It began with a gap. Imagine a canyon. Now, imagine that canyon has no bottom. It has no walls. It has no air to breathe. It has no light to cast a shadow. It is a yawning abyss of suspension, a place where the laws of physics, as we know them, do not apply, because there is nothing to apply them to. This is Ginnungagap, the yawning void, the deceptive void. It is a space of infinite potential and absolute zero. It is a vacuum so profound that it has a texture, a weight that presses against the consciousness. For untold eons, there was only this void. It was not merely empty. It was hungry. It waited. It was a canvas of negation. If you were to scream in Ginnungagap, the sound would not travel, for there was no medium to carry the vibration. If you were to weep, the tears would not fall, for there was no gravity to pull them down. They would simply float, freezing instantly into pearls of sorrow, suspended in the dark. But Ginnungagap was not truly alone. It was bordered. It was the neutral ground between two ancient, opposing, and terrible forces. To the north lay Niflheim. To the south lay Muspelheim. And the story of Ymir, the story of us, begins with the geography of these two extremes. Let us turn our gaze north first, into the shadows, into the mist. Niflheim is not simply a cold place. It is the metaphysical concept of cold given form. It is a realm of fog so thick it chokes the lungs, of darkness so absolute it blinds the mind. It is a world where entropy has won, where all energy has dissipated into a static, frozen stillness. In the heart of this dark world lies a well, a spring. It is called Hvergelmir, the roaring cauldron. Hvergelmir is the source of all fluids in the cosmos. It is a deep, bubbling, churning pit of primordial water. But this is not the fresh, sweet water of a mountain stream. This is ancient water. It is heavy. It is laden with the sediment of pre-existence. From this great cauldron, 11 rivers flow. They are known collectively as the Elivagar, the ice waves. Listen to their names. The ancient skalds memorized them as a map of terror. Svöl, Gunthra, Fjorm, Fimbultul, Slid, Hrid, Silg, Ilg, Vid, Leipter, Gjöl. Each name carries a specific vibration of cold and danger. Svöl means cool, but a coolness that burns like dry ice. Slid is a river filled not with water, but with knives and swords, churning and clashing in the dark current. Gjöll is the river that screams, the boundary that would later separate the land of the living from the land of the dead, flowing closest to the gates of hell. These 11 rivers surged out of Niflheim, pushed by the pressure of the Hvergelmir spring. They flowed into the Ginnungagap. But as they traveled further from their source, as they left the dark stability of the north and entered the absolute vacuum of the void, a transformation occurred. The water carried something within it. The ancient texts call it Eiter. Eiter is a difficult word to translate. It means poison. It means venom. But it also means yeast. It is a bitter fermentation agent. It is the chaotic biological potential that exists within the cold. As the rivers of Elevagar flowed into the silent abyss, the yeast within them began to react to the cold. The water did not just freeze, it died. It thickened. The poison rose to the surface like scum on a stagnant pond. It hardened. Imagine a river of sludge miles wide, slowly turning into a glacier. The poisonous yeast froze into rime, a hard, brittle hoarfrost. The vapor rising from the poison froze as well, creating a layer of rime ice that grew thicker and thicker. Layer upon layer, century after century, the ice pushed out into the void. It was not smooth ice. It was jagged. It was sharp. It was the color of a bruised twilight, grays, blacks, and dirty whites. It grew like a cancer, extending its frozen fingers into the nothingness of Ginnungagap. The northern part of the void began to fill up. It became a landscape of sheer cliffs of ice, of frozen waterfalls that hung in the silence like chandeliers of death. The air here was brittle. If you were to step on this ice, the sound would be a sharp crack that echoed for 1,000 miles. There was no life here, only the growing, creeping, relentless expansion of the rime. The ice was heavy with the weight of the Eiter, the poison that lay dormant within its crystal lattice. It was a sleeping toxicity, waiting for a catalyst. Now, turn your back to the north. Turn your face to the south. Far across the measureless expanse of Ginnungagap, there was another light, a red light, a pulsing, angry glow that stained the darkness. This was Muspelheim, the world of fire. If Niflheim is the stoppage of all atoms, Muspelheim is the acceleration of all atoms to the point of destruction. It is a realm of pure, unadulterated energy. There is no solid ground in Muspelheim. The earth itself is molten. The sky is a curtain of flame. The air is plasma. It is a place of blinding brightness and unbearable heat. And standing at the border of this burning world, there is a figure. He has been there since before the beginning, and he will be there until the very end. His name is Surt, the Black One. Surt is not like the giants we will meet later. He is not a creature of flesh and blood. He is a force of nature, anthropomorphized. He is a tower of char and magma, a living volcano given the shape of a man. In his hand, he holds a sword, but it is not a sword of iron or steel. It is a sword of shifting flame, brighter than the sun, hotter than a star. Surt stands sentinel at the edge of the fire. He does not move. He does not speak. He waits. He is the guardian of the heat. He looks out across the Ginnungagap, watching the encroaching ice of the north. He knows his destiny. He knows that one day he will step forward and burn the entire cosmos to ash. But in this primordial epoch, he is simply the source of the heat. He is the lighthouse in the dark. From Muspelheim, sparks and embers flew out. They were ejected by the violent storms of fire that raged within the realm. These sparks drifted into the Ginnungagap. Unlike the heavy, grinding rivers of the north, the sparks were light. They danced on the non-existent wind. They were flecks of gold and crimson, floating in the void. So, we have the architecture of the pre-world. To the north, the creeping, grinding, heavy glaciers of poisonous ice. To the south, the drifting, dancing, searing sparks of fire. And between them, the abyss. For eons, this was the state of things. A standoff. A slow-motion collision course. The ice moved south, driven by the pressure of the Vergelmir spring. The heat moved north, radiating from the fires of Muspelheim. The Ginnungagap, once empty, was shrinking. The gap was closing. It is difficult for the mortal mind to comprehend the timescales involved here. We are used to seconds, minutes, hours, years. But in the void, time was measured in the growth of ice crystals. 1,000 years might pass for a single layer of rime to form. 1,000,000 years might pass for a spark to drift halfway across the abyss. It was a silence that stretched the definition of endurance. But the laws of nature, even mythic nature, dictate that opposites must eventually meet. And when they do, change is inevitable. The ice of Niflheim reached the middle of the void. It was a massive wall of frozen venom, a continent of cold. But as it pushed further south, it began to encounter the influence of Muspelheim. It started subtly. The air, which had been paralyzed by the cold of the north, began to soften. A gentle warmth, like the breath of a sleeping animal, brushed against the face of the glacier. The sparks from the south met the rime from the north. This is the alchemical moment. This is the moment where chemistry becomes theology. Fire met ice. Heat met cold. Energy met matter. The reaction was not an explosion. It was not a violent war. Not yet. It was a melting. It was a thawing. The heat touched the rime, and the rime could not withstand it. But it did not simply turn back into water. Remember, this ice was formed from the Elevagar, the rivers of poison and yeast. It was complex matter. As the heat of Muspelheim bathed the frozen rime, the ice began to sweat. It began to drip. The silence of Ginnungagap was broken by the sound of dripping water. Drip, drip, drip. It was the ticking of the cosmic clock. The drops fell and gathered in the center of the void. They formed a slush, a primordial soup of venom, water, and heat. The yeast, the ether, which had been dormant in the ice, began to activate. The heat provided the energy. The ice provided the substance. Life is, at its core, a chemical reaction. It is the organization of chaos. And here, in the slush of the Ginnungagap, the ultimate organization began. The drops did not flow away. There was nowhere to flow to. They accumulated, they bonded, they thickened, the yeast fermented. The mixture began to bubble, not with heat, but with life. It took the shape of a man. But this was not a man like you or me. This was not a being of skin and bone and fragile organs. This was a being formed from the toxicity of the netherworld and the ferocity of the fire world. This was a creature of immense, impossible scale. He lay there in the slush, a sleeping mountain of flesh. he was vast. If he were to stand, his head would brush the stars that did not yet exist. His limbs were like mountain ranges. His breath was a gale-force wind. He was the first consciousness, the first ego, the first I in a universe of it. His name, echoing from the future memories of the gods, was Aurgelmir, the gravel yeller, the mud screamer. But the giants would come to know him by a simpler, darker name, Ymir. He was not a god. Do not mistake him for a god. A god is a being of order, of law, of hierarchy. Ymir was a being of chaos. He was the raw, unrefined power of nature. He was the earthquake, the avalanche, the storm. He was the embodiment of the untamed wilderness that surrounds the campfire of civilization. As he formed, he slept. The heat of Muspelheim kept him warm, kept the ice from reclaiming him. He lay in a coma of creation. But even in sleep, he was potent. The sheer biological force radiating from him was terrifying. He was a factory of life. The sweat that rolled from his body was not just water. It was pregnant with potential. It was magical fluid. And as Ymir slept, the silence of the void was replaced by a new sound, the sound of heavy, rhythmic breathing, the respiration of the first giant. Inhale, exhale. The mist of Niflheim was sucked into his lungs and expelled as storm clouds. The heat of Muspelheim warmed his massive chest. He was a living ecosystem, suspended in the nothingness. But he was alone, or so it seemed. The process of his formation had left behind residue. The melting ice had not all gone into Ymir. There was more slush, more rime drops reacting to the heat. And from this secondary reaction, another shape began to form beside the sleeping giant. It was not a humanoid shape. It was a beast, a creature of sustenance, a creature born to feed the hunger of the giant. Out of the thawing rime, the shape of a cow emerged, a cow of staggering proportions, white as the driven snow, with eyes like deep pools of ancient wisdom. Her name was Audumbla, the richless cow, the nourisher. She stood in the void, her hooves planted on the blocks of ice. She breathed the cold air. From her udders flowed 4 great rivers of milk, not water, but milk. White, rich, life-giving milk. These rivers flowed down into the Ginnungagap, creating a delta of sustenance. Ymir, in his sleep, sensed the nourishment. The scent of the milk reached his nostrils. He groaned, the first vocalization in history. A low, rumbling sound that shook the foundations of the ice. He crawled, instinctively, blindly, towards the source. He drank. The milk of Audumbla was the fuel he needed. It coursed through his veins, awakening the Aesir, strengthening his flesh, hardening his bones. He drank, and with every swallow he grew stronger, larger, more solid. But this act of feeding created a cycle. Ymir fed on the cow. But what did the cow feed on? There was no grass in the Ginnungagap. There was no grain. There was only the ice. Audumbla lowered her massive head. Her rough, pink tongue rasped against the salty rhinestones that surrounded her. She licked the ice. She sought the salt, the minerals trapped within the frozen water. And here, in this image, we have the central tableau of creation. The giant drinking the milk, the cow licking the ice, the fire warming them from the south, the mist cooling them from the north. It is a scene of desperate primal survival. There is no elegance here. There is only hunger and the need to exist. But as Audumbla licked the salt stones, something strange began to happen. The ice she was eroding was not empty. Just as Ymir had been trapped in the rime, something else was hidden in the blocks of salt. On the first day that she licked the stones, towards the evening, a hair appeared, a single long hair protruding from the ice. On the second day, as she continued to lick, a head was revealed, a face. It was a handsome face, fair and bright, unlike the brutish, heavy features of Ymir. On the third day, the entire being was freed. He stepped out of the ice, shaking the frost from his shoulders. He was tall, powerful, and radiant. He was Buri, and with his emergence, the board was set. On one side, Ymir, the dark, the chaotic, the offspring of poison and heat, the ancestor of the frost giants, the Jotun. On the other side, Buri, the fair, the ordered, the ancestor of the gods, the Aesir. They looked at each other across the expanse of the void. They did not speak. They did not fight. Not yet. But the tension was immediate. They were different species, different essences. One was the force that expands and consumes. The other was the force that defines and structures. Ymir, sated by the milk, fell back into a deep, heavy sleep. But the milk he had drunk was potent. It was working on his physiology. The Aether inside him was bubbling. While he slept, he began to sweat. The sweat pooled in the pits of his arms. It was a hot, muggy, magical sweat. And from this moisture, life spontaneously erupted. Under his left arm, a male and a female grew. They were fully formed giants, born from the filth and heat of his armpit. They pulled themselves free from his flesh, slick with sweat, already strong, already angry. At the same time, his legs began to move. His feet rubbed against each other. The friction, combined with the generative power of the Aether, sparked another birth. One foot begat a son with the other foot, a six-headed giant, a monster of pure deformity and strength, named Thrudgelmir. This was the beginning of the clan of the Hrimthursar, the Rime Giants. They were not born of union and love. They were born of sleep, sweat, and friction. They were asexual, parasitic replications of Ymir's own chaotic nature. They looked upon their father, the sleeping mountain, and they looked upon Buri, the man of the salt. The solitude of Ginnungagap was over. The silence was broken by the cries of newborn giants, the lowing of the great cow, and the cracking of the ice. The population of the cosmos had risen from 0 to a handful, but that handful contained within it the seeds of a war that would last until the end of time. We leave them there for a moment, Ymir sleeping, his body teeming with offspring, Audumbla licking the salt, Buri watching, calculating, the forces of Niflheim and Muspelheim continuing their eternal duel of temperature. The stage is built, the actors have entered, but the tragedy has not yet begun. To understand what happens next, we must look at the lineage of the Salt Man, Buri. We must see how the gods came to be, and why they looked at Ymir not as a father, but as a resource. We must look at the marriage of elements that produced the greatest of all deities, Odin. But that is a tale for the next turn of the wheel. For now, let the image of the sleeping giant in the void settle in your mind. Feel the cold of the rime. Smell the sulfur of the fire. Hear the drip, drip, drip of the melting ice. We are standing on the precipice of the first murder. The silence of Ginnungagap was no longer absolute. For an eternity, the only sound had been the hiss of the rime rivers and the crackle of distant fire. But now, the void was filled with the sounds of life. It was a cacophony of breathing. On one side of the great abyss, curled in the slush of the melting ice, lay Ymir. His sleep was heavy and troubled. His snoring was like the grinding of tectonic plates. Every exhalation was a gale that whipped the mists of Niflheim into swirling vortices. He was a mountain of flesh, a geography of skin and hair, sweating rivers of chaotic potential. And from this sweat, the population of the void was growing. We must pause here to understand the horror and the majesty of this reproduction. Ymir did not need a mate. He was a complete system unto himself, a hermetic vessel of creation. The giants that sprang from his armpits, the male and the female, were born fully formed, slick with the primordial slime of their father. They were the Hrimthursar, the rime giants. They were not creatures of light or spirit. They were creatures of substance. They were heavy, dense, and cold. They carried the memory of the poison rivers in their blood. Their temperaments were like the weather, unpredictable, violent, and harsh. From his feet, the six-headed sun, Thrudgelmir, had already begun to howl. 6 heads, 6 mouths screaming into the darkness, 6 minds filled with the instinct to consume and destroy. This was the legacy of Ymir. Multiplication without order. Growth without structure. But across the void, standing near the great cow Audumbla, was the other lineage, Buri. He stood tall and bright. Unlike the giants, whose skin was the color of stone and bruise, Buri shone with a pale inner luminescence. He was born of the salt lick. Think of the nature of salt. It is a preservative. It is crystalline. It creates structures, cubes, and lattices. It is the enemy of rot. Where Ymir was the fermentation of yeast, aether, Buri was the purification of salt. Buri looked upon the chaotic brood of Ymir with eyes that were clear and sharp. He did not speak to them. There was no common language yet, only the guttural roars of the giants and the silent, observant intellect of the salt man. But Buri, too, possessed the power of generation. The texts are silent on exactly how he did it, whether he too sweated a son, or if he molded him from the rime. But soon there was another. Buri begat a son. His name was Bor. If Buri was the raw element of order, Bor was the refinement of it. Bor was the first true man in the sense of the gods. He was strong, yes, but his strength was disciplined. He did not sprawl across the ice like Ymir. He stood. He walked. He explored the boundaries of the habitable space between the fire and the mist. We have now, in this small, fragile pocket of existence, 2 distinct tribes. The tribe of the yelling giant, Ymir, and the tribe of the salt man, Buri. In most mythologies, these 2 tribes would immediately go to war, the forces of good against the forces of evil. But Norse mythology is far more complex, far more realistic than that. It acknowledges that life is not black and white, but a shade of gray. Bor, the son of the salt, looked across the gap. He saw the daughters of the giants. He did not see enemies. He saw potential. He saw strength. Among the children of the giants, there was a female named Bestla. She was the daughter of a giant named Bolthorn, the Evil Thorn. Her lineage was pure chaos. Her grandfather was likely Ymir himself, or one of the first beings sprung from his sweat. She was of the earth, of the ice, of the poison. And Bor fell in love with her, or, if not love, he saw the necessity of union. This is the most critical genealogy in the history of the North, and it is often overlooked. The gods, the Aesir, are not pure beings of light. They are hybrids. Bor, the god of order, took Bestla, the giantess of chaos, as his wife. Think of the implications of this marriage. It is the fusion of the salt and the yeast. It is the mixing of the preservation instinct with the growth instinct. Without Bestla, Bor's line would have been sterile, perfect, but stagnant statues of salt. Without Bor, Bestla's line would have been a cancer, growing uncontrollably until it choked the universe. Together, they created something new, something that possessed the strength of the giants, but the mind of the gods. They had 3 sons. The first was Odin. The second was Vili. The third was Ve. Let us look at these 3 brothers. They were the first true personalities in the cosmos. They were not just biological accidents like the giants. They were intentional beings. Odin, the eldest. His name vibrates with power. Odin. It is derived from the word odor, which means fury, excitation, poetry, and mind. Even at his birth, he was the spirit. He was the breath. He was the intellect that seeks to understand, to categorize, and to conquer. He had the dark, deep eyes of his mother Bestla, eyes that could see into the shadows, but he had the upright, noble bearing of his father Bor. He was a paradox, a frantic mind in a disciplined body. Vili. His name means will. He is the driving force. He is the desire, the intent, the conscious decision to act. While Odin thinks, Vili resolves. He is the emotional engine of the triad. He represents the focused application of power. Ve. His name is the hardest to translate, but perhaps the most profound. Ve means temple, sanctuary, or holy place. He is the sacred. He is the separation between the mundane and the divine. He is the silence that follows the prayer. These 3 brothers grew up in the strangest nursery imaginable. They had no sun to warm them, only the distant red glow of Surt's fire. They had no ground to play on, only the slippery, treacherous ice flows of Ginnungagap. They had no toys, only the frozen bones of the rime. And they had neighbors. As Odin, Vili, and Ve grew into maturity, the void was becoming crowded. Ymir was still there. He had not moved. He lay in the center of the world, a bloated, massive tyrant of gravity. He continued to sleep. He continued to eat. He continued to breed. The herd of frost giants was multiplying exponentially. They were everywhere. They were loud. They were quarrelsome. They fought over the milk of Audumbla. They fought for the warmest spots near the southern edge. They defecated on the pristine ice of the north. They were a noisy, brawling mob of immense strength and little wit, and Ymir was their king, a sleeping, indifferent king, but a king nonetheless. The 3 brothers, Odin, Vili, and Ve, watched this. They stood on the periphery, looking inward. They saw the resources dwindling. Audumbla, the great cow, was exhausted. The 4 rivers of milk that flowed from her udders were running thin. There were too many mouths to feed. The giants drank greedily, spilling the precious white fluid onto the ice, wasting it, fighting over it. The brothers saw the salt stones being licked away to nothing. They saw the filth accumulating in the Ginnungagap. The purity of the void was being stained by the chaotic biology of the giant brood. But more than the physical filth, there was a metaphysical problem. Ymir was Ilar. Snorri Sturluson, writing in the Prose Edda, uses this word specifically. Ilar, it is often translated as evil. Ymir was evil, and all his kin. But we must be careful here. This is not the Christian concept of evil. Ymir was not the devil. He did not plot to corrupt souls. He did not whisper lies. He slept. How can a sleeping being be evil? In the Norse mindset, evil is that which opposes life, order, and society. Ymir was evil because he was destructive by nature. He was the storm that destroys the harvest. He was the avalanche that buries the village. He was the cancer that eats the host. He did not choose to be evil. He was entropy. His very existence was a threat to the possibility of a structured universe. As long as Ymir lived, nothing else could truly exist. There was no room for anything but him. If the brothers wanted to build, Ymir had to go. If they wanted to create, Ymir had to be unmade. If they wanted to live, Ymir had to die. It was the first conspiracy. Imagine the 3 of them, huddling together in the shadow of a great rime cliff, whispering in the tongue of the high gods. Odin spoke first. He was the visionary. He saw what could be. He looked at the vast, heaving body of Ymir, and he did not see a monster. He saw raw material. He saw the curve of a skull that could be a sky. He saw the hardness of bones that could be mountains. He saw the rushing of blood that could be an ocean. "He is too big," Odin whispered. "He takes up all the space. There is no room for us to grow." Vili spoke next. He was the will. He felt the anger of the oppressed. He felt the injustice of their situation, noble gods forced to scrounge for scraps while the mindless brood of Ymir feasted. "He will not move," Vili said. "He will not share. We must take what is ours." Ve spoke last. He was the sanctifier. He looked at the chaos, the noise, the disrespect of the giants. He saw a universe that was profane, unholy, and raw. "It must be done," Ve said softly. "To create the sanctuary, we must clear the ground." The decision was made. The first act of the gods would be a crime. It would be a patricide of sorts. Ymir was not their father, but he was the father of their mother, Bestla. He was the great ancestor. To kill him was to kill the root of their own family tree. But the Norse gods are pragmatic. They understood that creation requires destruction. You cannot build a house without cutting down the trees. You cannot carve a statue without chipping away the stone. Ymir was the stone, and the brothers were the chisels. They prepared themselves. They had no weapons forged of iron or bronze, for the earth did not yet yield metals. They had to improvise. Perhaps they fashioned spears from the hardest slivers of the primeval ice. Perhaps they used great blocks of salt as hammers. Or perhaps being gods, they simply summoned the raw Asmikinn, the god strength that was their birthright. They waited for the moment of deepest sleep. The sun of Muspelheim was dimming, a cyclical pulsing of the fires that passed for night in the void. The snoring of Ymir had settled into a deep, rhythmic thrumming. The other giants, the Hrimthursar, were scattered across the ice, sleeping in piles like puppies or gnawing on the bones of the rime. The three brothers moved. They moved with a silence that belied their size. They climbed. To reach the vital points of Ymir, they had to scale him. They climbed the foothills of his legs. They traversed the plains of his stomach. They ascended the sheer cliffs of his chest. The heat coming off the giant was immense. It was like walking on the surface of a slumbering volcano. The smell was overwhelming, the stench of ancient sweat, of unwashed flesh, of the raw chemical soup of creation. They reached the summit, the neck. Here, the great arteries pulsed beneath the skin, thick as rivers. The jugular vein of the cosmos throbbed with the dark, heavy blood of the Aesir. Odin looked at Vili. Vili looked at Ve. There was a moment of hesitation, a moment where the history of the world hung in the balance. If they turned back now, the universe would remain a void, populated only by sleeping monsters. There would be no Midgard, no Asgard, no Valhalla, no humans, just the eternal, pointless snoring of the giant. Odin nodded. Now, they struck. It was not a battle. It was an assassination. It was a butchery. They drove their weapons, or their fists, or their will, into the throat of the giant. They tore open the flesh. They severed the great vessels. Ymir's eyes flew open. For 1 second, the first being looked at his murderers. He looked at the grandchildren of his own blood. He saw the cold, blue eyes of Odin. He saw the grim determination of Vili. He saw the sorrowful necessity of Ve. He tried to scream. He tried to unleash the roar that had given him the name Aurgelmir, the gravel yeller. But no sound came out, only blood. The wound exploded. This was not a trickle of red. This was a geyser, the pressure of eons, the accumulated fluid of the Elivagar rivers, the milk of Audumbla, the melting ice. All of it had been stored within his massive frame. Now, it was released. A wall of blood erupted from his throat. It shot up into the dark sky of Ginnungagap, painting the rime ice in horrific crimson. Ymir thrashed. His death throes shook the void. The ice cracked. The earth he lay upon shattered. His arms flailed, crushing his own children, the giants who were sleeping nearby. But the brothers held on. They rode the dying mountain, driving their attack deeper and deeper, ensuring that the spark of life was fully extinguished. And then the flood began. The blood did not stop. It poured out of Ymir in an impossible volume. It flooded the valley of Ginnungagap. It rose like a red tide, sweeping away the rhinestones, sweeping away the salt licks. And it swept away the giants. The Hrimthursar, the rime giants, woke up to a nightmare. They were drowning in the blood of their father. They tried to swim, but the fluid was thick and hot. The current was too strong. "Save us!" they screamed. "The blood! The blood is rising!" One by one, the children of the armpit and the children of the feet were swallowed by the red deluge. The six-headed Thrudgelmir roared in defiance, but the waves crashed over his 6 mouths, silencing them forever. The entire race, the first generation of monsters, was being wiped out in a genocide of liquid iron. Odin, Vili, and Ve watched from the high ground of Ymir's corpse. They watched the extinction of their cousins. They did not look away. This was part of the plan. The slate had to be wiped clean. But fate is never so easily tidied up. Far away, on a piece of floating debris, perhaps a hollowed-out log or a wooden mill frame, the Luder, one giant managed to climb aboard. His name was Bergelmir. He was the son of the six-headed Thrudgelmir, the grandson of Ymir. He pulled his wife up with him. They clung to the floating wood, tossing and turning in the sea of blood. They watched their kin drown. They watched the three glowing gods standing on the corpse of the Ancestor. And in that moment, as Bergelmir looked at Odin, a hatred was born. A hatred deeper than the ocean. A hatred that would fuel the wars of the mythology for the next 10,000 years. "They killed him," Bergelmir whispered, his voice trembling with cold and rage. "They killed the father. They drowned the kin. Remember this. Tell our children. Tell their children. The Aesir are murderers." The flood eventually subsided. The blood settled, forming a vast dark ocean that encircled the center of the void. Silence returned to Ginnungagap, but it was a different kind of silence. The snoring was gone. The heavy, oppressive presence of the giant was gone. In its place lay a corpse of unimaginable size, a dead universe waiting to be recycled. Odin, Vili, and Ve stood on the chest of the fallen Titan. They were covered in blood. They were panting with exertion, but their eyes were bright. They looked at the body. They looked at the bone. They looked at the flesh. "It is done," Odin said. His voice echoed clearly now, no longer swallowed by the heaviness of the giant's aura. "Now," said Vili, "we have the materials." "Now," said Ve, "we can build." They did not mourn. They did not bury the body. To bury it would be to waste it, and the gods do not waste. They rolled up their sleeves. They prepared for the greatest act of taxidermy in the history of existence. They were about to turn a carcass into a cosmos. But before we watch them tear the flesh to make the soil and break the teeth to make the rocks, we must understand the sheer scale of this undertaking. This was not magic in the sense of waving a wand. This was labor. This was engineering. The death of Ymir was the end of the age of chaos. The dismemberment of Ymir would be the beginning of the age of architecture. As the blood sea calmed and the stars of Muspelheim continued to drift aimlessly above, the three brothers knelt down. Odin took the head of Ymir in his hands. "This," he said, "will be the sky." And so the work began. The silence that followed the great flood was different from the silence of the void. Before, the silence had been empty, a lack of existence. Now, the silence was heavy. It was the silence of a battlefield after the last cry has faded. It was the silence of a graveyard. The vast red sea of Ymir's blood had settled. It formed a dark, brooding ring around the center of Ginnungagap. In the middle of this sanguine ocean lay the corpse. It was an island of flesh, a continent of dead ambition. The body of the first giant was so large that it defied perspective. To walk from his shoulder to his hip would take a mortal man a lifetime. To climb the peaks of his knees would require an expedition of years. Odin, Vili, and Ve stood upon this landscape of death. They were the victors, but they were also the caretakers of a rotting universe. They looked out at the devastation they had wrought, the drowned giants, the stained ice, the cooling blood. They realized then that destruction was not enough. Killing the tyrant was only the first step. If they left the body here, it would simply decay. It would rot into a poison that would choke the Ginnungagap forever. The Aesir, the yeast of life, was still potent within the flesh. If left unchecked, it might spawn new horrors, new monsters even more terrible than the Hrimthursar. "We must use it," Odin said. His voice was the only sound in the cosmos. "We must transform it." And so began the great work, the transformation of the gross into the glorious, the alchemy of the gods. They did not have tools. They did not have cranes or bulldozers. They had only their hands, their will, and the raw magical strength of their divine heritage. They grabbed the body. Imagine the physics of this. 3 beings, no matter how powerful, dragging a carcass the size of a galaxy. They hauled Ymir into the very center of the Ginnungagap. They positioned him equidistant from the freezing mists of Niflheim and the raging fires of Muspelheim. They placed him in the sweet spot, the temperate zone where life could flourish without burning or freezing. Then the butchery began in earnest. They started with the flesh, the meat. The gods tore the muscles from the bones. They stripped the skin from the fascia. It was a gruesome task, wet and heavy. They took the vast slabs of meat, the hamstrings, the biceps, the pectoral muscles of the giant, and they laid them down. They spread them out. They kneaded them like dough. Under the hands of the gods, the flesh changed. The red, fibrous meat turned brown. It softened. It crumbled. The proteins broke down into minerals. The fat turned into loam. The flesh of Ymir became the soil. Every time you walk across a field, every time you dig a garden, you are digging into the transmuted meat of the Ancestor. The earth is not a dead thing. It is a compost of the first life. It is rich because Ymir was rich. It is fertile because Ymir was bursting with the potential of the Aesir. The gods sculpted the plains and the valleys from the soft tissues. They created the rolling hills from the curves of his muscles. They smoothed the land, preparing it for the roots that would one day grip it. But a world cannot be made of soft earth alone. It needs structure. It needs a skeleton. Odin turned his attention to the bones, the massive femurs, the ribs that arched like cathedral vaults, the spine that ran for thousands of miles. "These," Vili said, "shall be the anchors." They shattered the bones. They took the great leg bones and drove them deep into the soft earth they had just created. These became the mountains. The Rocky Mountains, the Himalayas, the Alps. These are the splintered shins of Ymir. They thrust upwards, jagged and white, piercing the sky. They are the enduring strength of the giant, calcified and frozen in time. The smaller bones, the knuckles, the vertebrae, the phalanges, were broken into millions of pieces. The gods scattered them across the land. They became the boulders, the rocks, the stones that litter the fields, and the teeth. Ymir's mouth had been filled with teeth, massive, flat grinders capable of crushing ice. The gods knocked them out, one by one. They took the broken molars, the shattered incisors, and the fragments of his jawbone. They cast them into the sea and along the cliffs. These became the scree, the gravel, the sharp stones that cut the feet of travelers. The cliffs of Dover, the fjords of Norway, these are the dental records of the giant. Next, they dealt with the fluids. The blood had already formed the outer ocean, the great sea that encircles the world. But Ymir was full of other fluids. There was the serum, the lymph, the bile. The gods channeled these. They dug trenches in the new earth, veins and arteries for the planet. They poured the fluids into these channels. They became the rivers, the lakes, the streams. The water of the world is the lifeblood of the giant, forever circulating, forever trying to return to the heart that no longer beats. The sweat of Ymir, that prolific, magical sweat that had birthed the first giants, was collected. It became the salty marshes, the brine of the deep fjords. But the most ambitious piece of engineering was yet to come. The world needed a roof. The gods looked at the skull. Ymir's skull was a dome of immense proportions. It was thick, hard, and curved. It was the casing that had held the first consciousness. It was the vault of the void. Odin, Vili, and Ve lifted it. It was heavy with the weight of thoughts unthought. They heaved it up, straining against the gravity of the abyss. They raised it high above the earth they had fashioned. They placed it like a lid over the world. This is the sky. When you look up, you are looking at the interior of Ymir's skull. The blue you see is not just the refraction of light. It is the bruised interior of the bone. The horizon is the rim of the helmet. But a skull is dark inside. The world was now solid, but it was pitch black. The light from Muspelheim was blocked by the bone dome. The mists of Niflheim were held back, but the darkness remained. The gods needed light. They looked south. They looked to Surt's realm. Muspelheim was still raging, spitting out sparks and embers, volcanic bombs of pure energy. Odin reached out. With the courage of a thief and the precision of an artist, he caught the sparks. He caught the flying embers of the fire world. He took the largest, brightest spark, a glowing ember the size of a city, and he set it in a chariot. He placed it in the sky. This became the sun, Sol. He took another spark, paler, cooler, reflecting the light of the first. He placed this one in another chariot. This became the moon, Mani. And then he took the millions of tiny sparks, the dust of the fire, and he pinned them to the inside of the skull. He hammered them into the bone like nails. These became the stars. Some he fixed in place to serve as guides for the sailors who were not yet born. These are the constellations. Others he left loose to wander across the dome. These are the planets. The sky was now illuminated. The interior of the skull sparkled with the stolen fire of Muspelheim. But the skull was not empty. Ymir's brain was still there. The gods did not throw it away. The brain is the seat of the storm. It is the seat of mood, of temper, of dark thoughts and flashing inspirations. They took the massive, gray, convoluted lobes of Ymir's brain, and they threw them into the sky. They scattered them on the wind. These became the clouds. Think of the nature of clouds. They are shifting, they are formless, they darken the sun. They bring rain and thunder. They are the shattered thoughts of the dead giant, still drifting through his own skull, casting shadows on the world below. When the sky turns gray and heavy, it is the mood of Ymir returning. When the lightning strikes, it is a synapse firing in the dead mind. The world was taking shape. It had earth, sea, sky, and light. It had weather, but it was defenseless. The gods remembered the flood. They remembered that not all the giants had drowned. Bergelmir and his wife had escaped on the Luder. Somewhere, out in the deep darkness beyond the ring of blood, the giants were regrouping. They were breeding again, and they were angry. The gods knew that this new world, this garden they were building from the corpse, would be a target. It was too beautiful, too orderly. The giants would hate it. They would try to smash it. They would try to return it to chaos. So the gods built a wall. They went back to the corpse. They looked at the face of Ymir. They saw his eyebrows, shaggy, thick, matted with the rime of the void. The eyebrows of the giant were like dense thickets. The gods tore them from the brow. They laid them in a circle. Inside the circle was the new earth, the sun-lit plains, the gentle ocean. Outside the circle was the deep, wild ocean, the Jotunheim, the land of the monsters. They called the enclosure Midgard, the middle enclosure, the middle yard. The eyebrows became the fortification. They became the impassable forests, the mountain ranges that separate the known from the unknown. They defined the boundary between civilization and wilderness. Everything inside the eyebrows was Ginnungagap, within the fence, safe, ordered, lawful. Everything outside the eyebrows was Utgard, outside the fence, wild, chaotic, dangerous. The architecture was complete. Midgard lay green and fresh under the new sun. The ocean lapped at the shores of the eyebrow fence. The sky skull arched overhead, painted with stars. But it was quiet. It was a beautiful, empty stage. There were no actors. The gods walked through the meadows they had made. They bathed in the rivers of giant serum. They climbed the mountains of giant bone. But they were alone. And then they noticed something. The flesh of Ymir, now the soil of the earth, was not dead. As we have said, the Aesir was still in it. The life force of the giant was stubborn. It wanted to manifest. As the new sun warmed the new earth, the soil began to writhe. The gods knelt down to examine it. They saw movement in the dirt. Small, pale, worm-like creatures were crawling out of the mud. They were tunneling through the meat-turned soil. They were maggots. Spontaneous generation. The corpse was decomposing, and from the decomposition new life was emerging. These were not the children of the gods. They were the scavengers of the giant. Odin looked at them. He did not step on them. He did not recoil in disgust. He saw once again potential. These creatures, he said, are born of the earth. They know the secrets of the stone. They know the pathways of the deep. The brothers made a decision. They would not kill the maggots. They would elevate them. They bestowed upon these worm creatures two gifts, reason and the shape of men. The maggots stood up. Their pale skin toughened. Their blind ends formed faces. they became the dwarves, the Dvergar. They were short, stocky, and strong, retaining the burrowing instinct of their maggot ancestors. They did not belong in the light. The sun, the stolen fire of Muspelheim, hurt their eyes. It reminded them that they were creatures of the dark flesh. If they stayed too long in the sun, they would turn back into the stone from which they came. So the gods gave them a realm. They gave them Svartalfheim, the world of the black elves. They gave them the underground. "You shall be the smiths," Odin decreed. "You shall be the builders. You shall live in the bones of the Father. You shall mine the gold and the iron. You shall craft the treasures of the world." The dwarves bowed. They were not grateful, perhaps, but they were obedient. They scurried into the cracks of the earth, into the caves and the caverns. They began to dig. They began to tap. The silence of the underground was broken by the sound of hammers. The gods had created a workforce, but they still lacked companions. They still lacked worshippers. The dwarves were too transactional, too greedy, too close to the earth. The gods wanted something that stood halfway between the dirt and the divine. One day, Odin, Vili, and Ve were walking along the shore of the new sea. The waves were crashing against the sand, the ground-up teeth of Ymir. They found 2 logs, 2 pieces of driftwood, washed up by the tide. They were shapeless, battered by the sea, bleached by the sun. They were tree trunks, ripped from some unknown shore, perhaps the roots of the World Tree itself, or perhaps the remnants of Ymir's hair that had become the first forests. One log was ash, Asker. The other log was elm, Embla. They lay there on the sand, inert. Wood, cellulose, dead matter. The gods stopped. They looked at the logs. They looked at each other. They had built a world. They had built a sky. They had built a workforce. But they had not yet built a soul. Odin stepped forward. He touched the logs. "I give you breath," he said. "I give you spirit. I give you the spark of life." He blew onto the wood. The logs shuddered. The bark softened into skin. The knots smoothed into muscles. The grain turned into veins. Vili stepped forward. "I give you wit," he said. "I give you movement. I give you the ability to think and to feel." The logs twitched, fingers formed, eyes opened, but they were empty eyes. They had life, but they had no senses. Ve stepped forward. "I give you speech," he said. "I give you hearing. I give you sight. I give you the ability to perceive the beauty of the work we have done." The transformation was complete. The ash log stood up. He was a man, Asker. The elm log stood up. She was a woman, Embla. They were naked, shivering on the beach of a newborn world. They looked at the gods, the glowing, terrible, beautiful architects of their existence. They looked at the sky, the skull of the giant. They looked at the earth, the flesh of the giant. They did not know the horror of their origin. They did not know they were walking on a corpse. They only knew that they were alive. The gods smiled. "Go," Odin said. "Go into Midgard. Go into the enclosure we have built. Dwell there. Multiply. Tend the earth." This was the birth of humanity. We are the children of the driftwood. We are the fragile things, tossed up by the sea of chaos, given shape by the whim of the gods. We are not strong like the giants. We are not magical like the elves. We are not industrious like the dwarves. We are the observers. We are the ones created to witness the majesty of the construction. And so, the cosmos was populated. In the sky, the sun and moon began their eternal chase, pursued by the wolves of darkness. In the earth, the dwarves tapped their hammers, forging gold and malice. In the fortress of Midgard, humans built their first fires, staring up at the stars, wondering what they were. And in the outer darkness, in Jotunheim, the giants watched. They remembered the blood. They sharpened their axes. But something was holding it all together. This construction, this patchwork of bone and wood and flesh, needed a central axis. It needed a spine that was stronger than Ymir's spine. It needed a root system that could drink from the deepest wells. The gods did not build this. They found it. Or, perhaps, it grew through their work, a parasite of perfection. The ash tree, the Yggdrasil. It rose from the center of the world. Its roots went down to the darkest depths. Its branches reached up above the sky skull, brushing the true infinite void beyond. It was the structure that connected the 9 worlds. For the world was not just Midgard and Asgard. The dismemberment of Ymir had created layers of reality. High above, in the crown of the tree, the gods built their own home, Asgard, the enclosure of the Aesir. They built it not from Ymir's body, but from the light and the magic of their own spirit. They connected it to Midgard with a bridge, the Bifrost, the shimmering path, the rainbow. It was a bridge of fire, air, and water. It was fragile, yet strong enough to bear the weight of the gods. Below Midgard, in the roots, lay the other realms. Niflheim, the old world of mist, was now the land of the dead, ruled by a goddess who was half corpse, half queen. Helheim. And somewhere, deep in the hot south, Muspelheim still burned, waiting. The cosmology was complete. The great machine of Norse mythology was running. But let us pause and reflect on the nature of this machine. It is a machine built on violence. It is a world built on death. Every aspect of the Norse universe is a reminder of the sacrifice of Ymir. When the wind blows through the trees, the skalds say it is the sigh of the giant. When the earthquake strikes, it is the giant shifting in his sleep, or perhaps the earth remembering the pain of the butchery. When we drink water, we drink the blood of the Ancestor. There is a profound melancholy in this creation myth. In other religions, the world is made from nothing, creatio ex nihilo. God speaks, and it is. It is clean, it is pure. In the North, the world is made from something. It is recycled. It is messy. It carries the DNA of the victim. This means that the world is not perfect. It is flawed. It has the Ilar, the chaotic evil of Ymir, baked into its very crust. The poison yeast, the Eitur, is still there, deep underground, bubbling in the veins of the earth. This is why the world is hard. This is why the winter kills. This is why the sea drowns. The world is not our friend. The world is a dead giant that tolerates us. And the gods know this. They know that the structure they built is temporary. They know that eventually the Aesir will rot the roots of the tree. They know that the eyebrows of Midgard will rot. They know that the skull will crack. They know that Ymir will eventually have his revenge. But for now, it holds. For now, the sun shines. For now, the rain falls. For now, the humans love and fight and die in the middle yard. The gods looked at their work, and they saw that it was sufficient. It was sturdy. It was grim. It was beautiful in its severity. Odin sat on his high throne, Hlidskjalf, which allows him to see into all the worlds. He looked down at the tiny figures of ash and elm moving through the forests of Ymir's hair. He looked at the dwarves digging in Ymir's toes. He felt a burden, the burden of the king. He had killed his ancestor to buy a future for these creatures. He had stained his hands with blood to create a space for life. He knew the price would be high. He knew that for every action, there is a reaction. He touched his eye, the eye that he would later sacrifice for wisdom. He felt the weight of the prophecy settling on his shoulders. But that is a story for the future. That is the story of the preservation of the world. Today, we celebrate the creation. We celebrate the anatomy of the world. Take a moment. Look at the ground beneath your feet. Feel the solidity of it. That is the flesh. Look at the clouds drifting by. Those are the brains. Look at the stars. Those are the nails of fire. You are walking through a graveyard that has been turned into a garden. You are the guest in the house of the dead. And as the sun sets, casting long shadows across the land, remember the silence of Ginnungagap. Remember the scream that never came. Remember the brothers who stood in the blood and decided to build. The stage is set. The players are ready. But there are other beings in this world, beings that were not made by the gods, but who serve the cosmic order, the Norns, the Valkyries, the Vanir. We will see the binding of the wolf and the casting of the serpent. But for today, let the dust settle. Let the new rivers find their courses. Let the first leaves unfurl on the first trees. The giant is dead. Long live the world. The dust of creation had settled. The great tectonic shifts of Ymir's bones had ceased their groaning. The rivers of his blood had found their beds and were flowing with a steady, rhythmic pulse. The sky, that vast dome of the skull, was blue and clear, scrubbed clean by the winds of the four dwarves, Nordri, Sudri, Ostri, and Vestri, whom the gods had set at the cardinal points to hold up the heavens. It was the morning of the world. We call this era the Age of Gold, Gulalder. It is a time that exists in the memory of every mythology, a time before corruption, before war, before the first lie was whispered. But in the Norse mind, this golden age was not just a metaphor for innocence. It was a literal description of the landscape. The gods, the Aesir, having finished their grisly work of butchery and architecture, gathered on a vast plain in the center of Asgard. This plain was called Idavall, the shining field. It was a plateau of perfect green, watered by the mists of the morning, suspended high above the toil of the humans in Midgard and the brooding darkness of the dwarves in Svartalfheim. Here, the gods built their first temples. They built Gladsheim, the place of joy, for Odin and the 12 high gods. They built Vingolf, the hall of friendly floor, for the goddesses. But they did not build these halls from the bones of Ymir. They had moved beyond the scavenger phase. They looked into the earth, into the deep veins of the giant they had slain, and they found something new. They found metal, but not the cold iron of the blood, nor the gray lead of the heavy thoughts. They found gold. Gold, in the Norse cosmology, is often called the fire of the water, or the tears of Freya. But in this primordial time, it was simply the abundance of the earth. It was the crystallized light of the sun trapped in the rock. The gods mined it. They forged it. They made everything from gold. They made their plates and their cups. They made their hammers and their tongs. They made the furniture of their halls. Even the checkers they played with were made of pure, heavy, soft gold. Imagine the scene. Odin, Vili, and Ve, cleansed of the gore of the Ginnungagap, sitting on golden stools in the eternal sunlight of Idavol. They are playing Tafel, a board game of strategy and capture. They are laughing. They are young. There is no gray in Odin's beard yet. He has 2 eyes. They are the masters of the universe. They have brought order to chaos. They have turned a monster into a mansion. They believe that the work is done. They believe that the evil of Ymir has been completely transmuted into the utility of the world. But they are wrong. You cannot build a paradise on a grave and expect the ghost to stay quiet. While the Aesir were playing with gold in the high heavens, something else was happening in the outer darkness. We must turn our gaze away from the light of Asgard. We must look to the east, to the cold, jagged coastlines of the outer world, to Utgard, to Jotunheim, the land of the giants. Remember Bergelmir, the grandson of Ymir, the one who climbed onto the Luder, the wooden mill box, with his wife while the red ocean swallowed his kin? He survived. He washed ashore on a desolate continent of rock and ice. He stood on the freezing beach, shivering, traumatized, filled with a grief so deep it felt like drowning. He looked back towards the center of the world, towards the new sun that the murderers had hung in the sky. He did not see a beautiful sunset. He saw the stolen eye of a thief. He did not see the green earth. He saw the rotting flesh of his grandfather. Bergelmir was not a god. He did not have the power to create from nothing, but he had the power of the Jotun. He had the power of the Aiter, the yeast of life. He and his wife began to breed. But this was not the joyous creation of the Aesir. This was a desperate, angry repopulation. They birthed a new generation of giants. But these were not just the rime giants of the old void. These were the giants of the iron wood. Jotunheim is a landscape of hostility. It is a mirror image of Asgard, but twisted. Where Asgard has gold, Jotunheim has iron. Where Asgard has manicured lawns, Jotunheim has the Jarnvidder, the iron wood. The trees here are not made of cellulose and sap. Their bark is metal. Their leaves are razor-sharp blades. The wind does not rustle the leaves, it clangs against them. In this forest the giantesses dwell. They are the witches, the troll wives. They sit in the caves of iron, and they give birth to wolves. This is the legacy of Ymir, refusing to die. The Ilar, the chaotic evil, was not erased by the flood. It was concentrated. It was pushed to the margins. and like mold in a damp corner, it grew faster in the dark. The giants of this new age, the sons and daughters of Bergelmir, grew up with a single story, a single catechism taught to them at their mother's knee. "The world is ours," the mothers would whisper. "The mountains are your great-grandfather's bones. The ocean is his blood. The Aesir are squatters. They are thieves. They killed the first one, and they sleep on his corpse." This narrative of victimhood and vengeance is the engine of Norse mythology. It is what drives the conflict. The giants are not mindlessly evil. They are politically motivated. They are the indigenous population of the void, displaced by the colonizing gods. And they possess something the gods do not. They possess the memory of the deep past. The gods are creatures of the now. They are focused on ruling, on maintaining order. But the giants are creatures of the then. They remember the Ginnungagap. They possess the ancient wisdom. This is why, later in the myths, even Odin must go to the giants to learn the secrets of the universe. He must go back to the source. But there is a third power emerging in this golden age, a power that sits between the gods and the giants, a power that tends to the wound of the world. We must look to the tree, the ash Yggdrasil, the World Tree. We mentioned it before, but now we must look at its roots. For it is in the roots that the true drama of Ymir's legacy plays out. The tree has 3 great roots. The first root goes to Asgard, to the Aesir. The second root goes to Jotunheim, to the giants. The third root goes to Niflheim, to the dead. But the tree is a living thing. It needs water. It needs soil. And what is the soil? Under the root that stretches towards Asgard, there is a well. The well of Urd, the well of fate. Living beside this well are 3 women. They are not Aesir, they are not Jotun, they are something else. They are the Norns, Urdur, that which became. Verdandi, that which is becoming. Skuld, that which shall be. They are the weavers of time, but more importantly, they are the caretakers of the corpse. The texts tell us that every day the Norns take water from the well. But they do not just take water. They take the gravel. They take the mud that lies around the well. This mud has a name. It is called Aur. Does that sound familiar? Remember Ymir's original name, Aurgelmir, the gravel yeller. The mud in the well of Urd is the primal substance of Ymir. It is the holiest clay. The Norns mix the water and the mud, creating a white, magical paste. Every day they walk to the great ash tree. They plaster this mud onto the bark of the tree. They paint the tree with the essence of the giant. Why? Because without this mud, the tree would rot. The tree would wither. The branches would become brittle and snap. Here is the supreme irony of the Norse cosmos. The gods killed Ymir to build the world. But to keep the world alive, to keep the structure from collapsing, the Norns must constantly reapply the substance of Ymir to the axis of the universe. The victim sustains the victory. The ore is so holy that anything it touches becomes transparent and white, like the inner membrane of an eggshell. It is the bleach of the sacred. It turns the rough bark of existence into something enduring. So, while Odin plays checkers on the golden tables of Idavol, the Norns are down in the mud, working. They are the maintenance crew of reality. They are ensuring that the violence of the creation does not undo itself. But there is a creature that gnaws, deep in the third root, the root that goes down to Niflheim, down to the boiling cauldron of Hvergelmir, where the poison rivers began. There is a dragon, Nidhogr, the malice striker, the hater. He is not a glorious dragon of fire. He is a parasite, a maggot that grew too large. He lives in the necrotic tissue of the universe. He gnaws on the root of the tree. Nidhogr is the physical manifestation of Ymir's resentment. He is the cancer that tries to separate the tree from the source. He wants the tree to fall. He wants the skull to crack. He wants the ocean of blood to rise again. He chews, crunch, crunch, crunch. And up in the branches there is an eagle. And between the eagle and the dragon, a squirrel named Ratatoskr runs up and down, carrying insults. "The dragon says you are blind," the squirrel tells the eagle. "The eagle says you are slow," the squirrel tells the dragon. This is the communication system of the world. Insults, tension. The axis of the universe is a telephone line of hatred. But back in the Golden Age, on the fields of Idavol, the gods do not yet hear the gnawing. They are too distracted by their own brilliance. They are building. They are naming. Odin is obsessed with names. He knows that to name a thing is to own it. He travels through the world he made from the giant's corpse, pointing at things. "This is a stone," he says, and the bone fragment obeys. "This is a cloud," he says, and the brain mist obeys. He creates the language of power. The runes are not yet found. That requires another sacrifice. But the naming is the first magic. However, the Golden Age could not last. It was flawed because it was static. The gods were playing a game where they made all the rules, but they had forgotten the variable of the Vanir. We must speak briefly of the Vanir, not to leave the saga of Ymir, but to show how the other always returns. The Vanir were another tribe of gods. Where did they come from? The texts are vague. Perhaps they coalesced from the more fertile parts of Ymir's body, the loins, the reproductive organs, while the Aesir came from the salt and the mind. The Vanir were gods of magic, of nature, of pure biology. They saw the Aesir building their golden halls. They saw the arrogance of Odin. They sent a woman, Gullveig, the power of gold, the madness of gold. She walked into the hall of Odin. She was beautiful, but terrifying. She spoke of magic that the Aesir did not understand. She spoke of Seder, the weaving of fate, the manipulation of the soul. The Aesir, threatened by this uncontrollable feminine power, did what they always did. They resorted to violence. They speared her. They threw her into the fire. She burned. She turned to ash. But she stepped out of the fire, whole and smiling. They burned her again. She stepped out again. 3 times they burned her. 3 times she was reborn. This was the end of the Golden Age. The murder of the witch broke the peace. The war with the Vanir began. Why is this important to the saga of Ymir? Because it was the first time the walls of Asgard were breached. The Vanir, using their magic, broke down the fortifications. The fortifications made of Ymir's eyebrows. The barrier between the inner world and the outer world was damaged. The illusion of safety was shattered. The gods realized that they were not invulnerable. They realized that the corpse world they lived in was fragile. The war ended in a truce, as all stalemate wars do. The Aesir and Vanir exchanged hostages. They spat into a jar to seal their pact, creating Kvasir, the being of wisdom. But the damage was done. The innocence of Idavol was lost. The golden checkers were scattered. The gods looked at their broken walls. They looked at the mountains. They looked at the sky. They felt a chill. It was the Fimbul winter, whispering from the future. It was the breath of the dead giant, blowing through the cracks in the world. Odin, the great architect, realized he needed more than just walls. He needed information. He needed to know the future. He needed to know how long the structure would hold. He looked down at the well of Mimir. This well lay under the route that stretched to Jotunheim. It was located in the land of the giants. It was guarded by Mimir, the Rememberer. Mimir was likely a giant himself, or an ancient being as old as Buri. He drank from the well every day, using the Gjallarhorn. He drank wisdom. He drank the memory of the past. Odin traveled there. He walked through the iron wood, ignoring the jeers of the new giant brood. He walked past the wolves. He came to the well. "I want a drink," Odin said. Mimir looked at the king of the gods. He looked at the creator of the world. "The water is not free," Mimir said. "This water contains the truth of the origin. It contains the scream of Ymir. It contains the secret of the inevitable end. To drink it is to lose your innocence forever." "I have no innocence," Odin said. "I have only responsibility. Name your price." "Your eye," Mimir said. "The price of wisdom is the loss of perspective. To see the truth, you must give up half your vision of the physical world." Odin did not hesitate. He gouged out his own eye. He dropped it into the well. Splash. The eye sank. It stared up from the depths of the water. It stared up from the liquid memory of the giant. Odin drank. And in that moment, the saga of Ymir shifted from a story of creation to a story of preservation. Odin saw the end. He saw Ragnarok. He saw the wolf breaking the chain. He saw the serpent rising. He saw the ship of nails sailing from the east. He saw that Ymir would eventually reclaim his own body. The earth would sink back into the sea. The sky would be rent asunder. The fire of Muspelheim would return to burn the work of the gods. The cycle was a circle. Odin returned to Asgard. He was one-eyed, gray, and grim. The Golden Age was over. The Age of Anxiety had begun. He gathered his brothers. He gathered the new gods, Thor, Tyr, Heimdall. "We must prepare," Odin said. "The giant is dead, but his shadow is long. We must fill this world with heroes. We must build Valhalla." And so the recruitment began. The harvesting of human souls to fight in a war that was already lost. But deep in the earth, in the stone of the mountains, the dwarves were also changing. They felt the shift in the gods. They felt the demand for weapons replacing the demand for jewelry. They began to forge the tools of death. They forged Mjolnir. They forged Gungnir. They forged the chains that would bind the monsters. The world had become an armed camp. But amidst all this preparation, amidst the clanging of anvils and the marching of the Einherjar, the simple biological processes of Ymir continued. The seasons turned. The blood ocean followed the pull of the moon. The hair forests turned green, then gold, then bare. The tragedy of Ymir is that he is the stage for his own enemies. He supports the feet of the gods who killed him. He feeds the humans who worship his killers. He is the ultimate silent victim, the omnipresent substrate of existence. But is he truly silent? Sometimes, in the high mountains, you can hear the glaciers cracking. It is a sound like a gunshot. It is the ice shifting. The giants say it is Ymir grinding his teeth. Sometimes, the volcano erupts. The pressure from below bursts the skin of the earth. The giants say it is Ymir's anger boiling over. The world is a thin crust over a vat of boiling history. As we move toward the end of our saga, we must examine the final component of Ymir's legacy. We must look at the creatures that were born after the creation, but who embody the spirit of the destroyer. We must look at the monstrous children, the wolf, the serpent, the queen of hell. They are the children of Loki, yes, but Loki is the blood brother of Odin, and by some accounts, the son of a giant. He is the chaotic element introduced into the order of Asgard. Loki is the agent of Ymir. He is the virus in the system. And we will see how the first humans, Ask and Embla, began to wake up to the reality of their precarious existence. The golden tables are put away. The game is over. The wolf is at the door. Listen to the wind. It is picking up. The leaves of the iron wood are clattering. The giant is dreaming of waking up. We descend now. We leave the golden, windswept plains of Idavol, where the gods sit in their anxious splendor. We leave the high, rarefied air of the Skull Dome. We go down, past the green fields of Midgard, past the roots of the clover and the oak, down into the dark, dense, claustrophobic reality of the earth itself. We are entering Svartalfheim, the home of the Black Elves. But to understand this realm, you must remember where we are. We are not just in a cave. We are inside the flesh of Ymir. When Odin and his brothers butchered the Ancestor, the meat did not simply vanish. It transformed. It hardened. It compacted. But the memory of the flesh remains. The underground is a place of heavy, oppressive silence, broken only by the rhythmic tink, tink, tink of hammers. It is hot here, not the burning heat of Muspelheim, but the humid, metabolic heat of a decomposing body. The air smells of sulfur, iron, and ancient, stagnant blood. The inhabitants of this realm are the Dvergar, the dwarves. Their origin story is one of the most visceral and disturbing in all of mythology. Most cultures view their craftsman gods as noble beings, forged from fire or light. But the Norse, with their unflinching realism, looked at the dwarves and saw the truth of the soil. The Voluspa, the prophecy of the seeress, tells us plainly, the dwarves were bred from the earth, as maggots are in flesh. Pause on that image. When the gods lifted the skull of Ymir to make the sky, the body lay rotting in the void. It was festering, and like any corpse left in the open, it began to crawl with life. Great, white, blind larvae wriggled through the giant's muscles. They ate the dead meat. They tunneled through the necrotic tissue. Odin, Vili, and Ve saw them. They saw the industry of these creatures. They saw how they moved through the stone/flesh with ease. They saw that these maggots were the ultimate recyclers. The gods did not create the dwarves. They modified them. They gave them the human shape, manlikon, and wit, vit. But they did not give them a soul. They did not give them the breath of life that they would later give to humans. The dwarves remained creatures of the substance. They are intelligent, yes. They are cunning. They are skilled beyond measure. But they are cold. They are transactional. They are the maggots who learned to count. Because of this origin, the dwarves have a unique relationship with the sun. The sun is the enemy. It is the eye of the gods, the stolen fire of Muspelheim. If a dwarf is caught in the direct rays of the sun, the magic that holds his form together fails. He calcifies. He returns to his original state, not as a maggot, but as the stone he inhabits. He becomes a statue, a petrified memory of life. So they live in the dark. They live in the veins of Ymir. And what veins they are! The gold that runs through the earth is the crystallized nervous system of the giant. The iron is the dried, hardened blood. The gems are the hardened lymph. The dwarves mine these treasures. They are obsessed with the hoard. Why? Because it is their heritage. They are eating their way through the Ancestor, just as they did when they were larvae. But now, instead of digesting the flesh, they are refining it. They are the smiths of the subterranean. The Voluspa gives us a catalogue of their names, the Dvergatal. It is a chanting list of power. Motsognir was the mightiest of them all, the first leader. Durin was the second, and then the others, whose names describe their nature and their craft. Nii and Needi, new moon and dark moon. Nordri, Sudri, Austri, Vestri, north, south, east, west. The four dwarves burdened with holding up the heavy skull of the sky. Althiof, mighty thief. Dwalin, the sleeper. Nar, corpse. These names are not random. They are coordinates in the geography of the underground. They represent the phases of the moon, the directions of the wind, the stillness of the dead. The dwarves are the masters of the impossible. Because they live in a world of magic and matter, they can craft things that defy the laws of physics. They can forge a sound. They can weld a shadow. Later, in the myths, when the gods need to bind the great wolf Fenrir, the grandson of Ymir's spirit, they turn to the dwarves. The gods try to use chains of iron, but the wolf breaks them. Iron is brittle. Iron is merely dead blood. So the dwarves craft Gleipnir. Listen to the ingredients of this fetter. It was made from the sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, the spittle of a bird. These are things that do not exist. They are paradoxes. But the dwarves, the maggots of the impossible flesh, can take a paradox and weave it into a ribbon. They can take the absence of a thing and make it strong. This ribbon, Gleipnir, was soft as silk, but stronger than any metal. It bound the chaos when brute force failed. This is the role of the dwarves in the saga of Ymir. They are the technicians of the corpse. They maintain the structural integrity of the world from below. They are the ones who rivet the tectonic plates together. They are the ones who keep the deep fires from consuming the surface. But they are not the only inhabitants of this new world. We must rise now, up through the shafts of the mines, up through the caves, up through the soil of the midworld. We emerge into the fresh air. We stand on the beach where the land meets the sea. Here, we find the second experiment of the gods. We find us. The creation of humanity is the counterpoint to the creation of the dwarves. The dwarves came from the flesh, earth. Humans came from the hair, vegetation. Odin, Vili, and Ve were walking along the shoreline. The sea, the blood of Ymir, was tossing gray waves against the sand, the teeth of Ymir. The gods were lonely. They had the dwarves, but the dwarves were sullen and greedy. They had the giants, but the giants were hateful and dangerous. They wanted something else. They wanted an audience. They wanted beings who would look at the sky and marvel, not just measure it. They found two logs, Asker and Embla, the ash and the elm, driftwood. Think of the poetic resonance of driftwood. It is wood that has been torn from its roots, stripped of its leaves, beaten by the ocean, and bleached by the sun. It is a survivor. It is organic matter that has been seasoned by the chaos of the blood sea. The gods picked them up. These logs were inert. They had no breath, no wit, no hair, no voice, and no good likeness. They were potential, but they were empty. Odin stepped forward. He placed his hands on the rough wood. He leaned in close, his golden beard brushing the bark. He gave the first gift: Ond, breath, spirit, the ability to exist as a conscious entity, the spark that separates the living from the dead. This breath was Odin's own breath. It was a piece of the divine wind. Vili, or Hunir in some versions, stepped forward. He gave the second gift: odor, wit, sense, the ability to think, to move, to feel emotion, the will to act. The motor functions that allow a log to become a walker. Ve, or Lodur in some versions, stepped forward. He gave the third gift: La and Leti, appearance and speech, the flush of blood in the cheeks, the color of the eyes, the ability to articulate thoughts into words. The logs transformed. The bark softened into skin, fragile, soft skin, so unlike the hide of the giant or the stone skin of the dwarf. The knots became joints. The grain became the nervous system. Ask, the male, and Embla, the female, opened their eyes. They looked at the gods. They saw the one-eyed king. They saw the will. They saw the holy. But then they looked around. They realized where they were. They were standing on a beach made of teeth. The water lapping at their feet was blood. The mountains looming over them were bones. The horror of the human condition in Norse mythology is that we are parasites living on a corpse. We are lice in the hair of a dead giant. We are small. We are weak. We have no claws, no fangs, no stone skin. We freeze in the winter. We burn in the summer. We drown in the sea. The world, the body of Ymir, is hostile to us. The cold winds of Niflheim try to freeze us. The hot sun of Muspelheim tries to scorch us. But we have something the giant did not have. We have the spirit of Odin. We have the ingenuity to survive. We built houses from the trees, Ymir's hair, to shelter us from the wind. Ymir's breath. We built fires, stolen sparks of Muspelheim, to keep away the cold, Niflheim. We mined the iron, Ymir's blood, to make spears to fight the wolves, Ymir's children. And we established the gift cycle. The gods knew that humans were weak, so they built the enclosure, Midgard, the middle yard. They fenced us in with the giant's eyebrows. They said, "Stay here. Do not go into the deep woods. Do not go to Jotunheim. Stay where it is safe." And in return for this protection, humans gave worship. Blot, sacrifice. We killed the animals, the lesser life forms, and offered their blood to the gods. We poured libations onto the earth. Why? To feed the earth? No, to feed the contract, to remind the gods of their obligation to protect us. We give so that you may give. It was a relationship born of fear and necessity. The humans feared the giants. The gods feared the giants. So they formed an alliance. The gods provided the walls. The humans provided the praise. But there is a melancholy in the human existence, too. We are made of ash and elm. Trees. Trees have roots. But as humans, our roots are cut. We are driftwood. We are wanderers. We are always looking for a home in a world that is essentially a grave. And hanging above us, connecting our fragile world to the citadel of the gods, is the Bifrost, the trembling path. It is the only way out, the rainbow bridge. It is described as having 3 colors. The red in the rainbow is burning fire. This is important. The bridge is burning to prevent the frost giants from crossing it. If the giants were to step on the Bifrost, the fire would consume them. Only the gods, who have mastered the elements, can ride across it. Humans look up at the bridge. We see it arching over the skull sky. We see the Aesir riding their horses, Odin on Sleipnir, Thor in his chariot, though he must wade the rivers, as his heat would break the bridge. We see the flash of Heimdall's armor as he stands guard at the Himinbjörg, the heaven cliffs. We know that we are watched, but we also know we are separated. We are the visible folk. We live in the open. The dwarves are the hidden folk. They live in the dark. The giants are the hostile folk. They live in the wild. The gods are the high folk. They live in the sky. This is the sociology of the Ymir world. It is a caste system determined by where you sit on the corpse. But as the ages passed, the boundaries began to blur. The dwarves made beautiful things, necklaces like Brisingamen, and the goddesses lusted after them. Freya slept with the dwarves to get the gold. The bloodlines mixed. The gods lusted after the giantesses. Freyr gave away his sword to marry Gerdur. Odin seduced Gunnlod to get the mead of poetry. The bloodlines mixed. The Ilar, the evil of Ymir, was sexually transmitted back into the gene pool of the gods. And the humans, we were caught in the middle. When Thor fought a giant, the thunder shattered our roofs. When the dwarves forged a curse, our crops failed. We were the collateral damage of a cosmic family feud. But the deepest secret of this era is found in the mead of poetry. Where did it come from? It came from Kvasir, the being made from the spit of Aesir and Vanir. Kvasir was killed by dwarves, Fjalar and Galar. They drained his blood and mixed it with honey. the mead of poetry is blood. When a skald sings, when a poet recites a saga, they are drunk on blood. Odin stole this mead back from the giants. He drank it. He regurgitated it into vats in Asgard. But some of it spilled. The fool poet's portion. The drops that fell from Odin's mouth as he flew over Midgard in the shape of an eagle. These drops fell on us, on the humans. This is why we have art. This is why we have music. This is why we tell stories. We have tasted the spilled blood of wisdom. We have tasted the essence of the truce. So, here we stand in the middle of the saga. The corpse is stable. The maggots are mining. The driftwood is singing. The gods are watching, but the shadow is lengthening. The sun, that stolen spark, is moving towards its winter solstice. The wolves Shull and Hati are getting closer to their prey. And in the iron wood, the old Angerboda, the hag of the east, is nursing a new brood. She is not raising giants this time. She is raising monsters. She is raising the children of Loki. Loki, the blood brother of Odin, the trickster, the shapeshifter. He has traveled to the iron wood. He has mated with the witch. And what they have produced will not just inhabit the world of Ymir. They will consume it. We will see how the gods, in their desperate attempt to bind these new horrors, only succeeded in guaranteeing their own destruction. The maggots have done their work. The ash has grown tall, but the axe is being sharpened. The binding of the chaos is about to begin, and we will see that a chain made of the sound of a cat's footfall may be strong, but it is not eternal. Nothing built on a corpse can last forever. The golden light of Idavol was a deception. While the Aesir were building their high halls and drinking their mead, believing that the chaotic legacy of Ymir had been tamed, the roots of the world were drinking poison. We must remember that the World Tree Yggdrasil does not just draw sustenance from the holy well of Urd. It also draws from the deep, dark waters of Jotunheim. It draws from the iron wood. Jarnvidr. To understand the undoing of Ymir's world, you must walk through this forest. It lies to the east of Midgard, on the very edge of the map, bordering the chaotic ocean. Here, the trees are not made of the soft, growing hair of the giant. They are petrified. They are ancient. Their bark is hard as cold iron. Their leaves are not green. They are the color of rust. When the wind blows from the sea, the forest does not whisper. It clanks. It grinds. It sounds like a million swords being drawn from their scabbards. In this forest lived the troll wives, the Jarnvidjur. They were the witches of the giant clan, the keepers of the old dark magic that the Aesir had tried to banish. And among them lived the mother of the apocalypse, Angerboda. Her name means the one who offers sorrow, or the harm bidder. She was not beautiful in the way the goddesses of Asgard were beautiful. She was elemental. She was raw. She was the fury of the storm and the cold of the grave. She was the direct spiritual descendant of Ymir's chaotic nature. And to this forest came a traveler, Loki. Loki is the complication in the Norse cosmos. He is the blood brother of Odin, sworn in a ceremony where they mixed their blood in the earth. He lived among the gods. He ate at their tables. He helped them build their walls, often fixing problems he himself had caused. But Loki's heart was not of the Aesir. His father was Farbauti, cruel striker, a giant. His mother was Laufi, Tree Island. Loki was a creature of the threshold. He walked between the worlds, and he felt a pull towards the darkness. He felt a kinship with the chaos of the iron wood. He visited Angerboda in secret. This was not a romance of flowers and poetry. This was a convergence of destructive forces. It was a chemical reaction, much like the fire meeting the ice in Ginnungagap. When the god of mischief lay with the giantess of sorrow, they did not produce normal children. They produced disasters. They produced the three greatest threats to the cosmic order. The three beings who would eventually dismantle the work of Odin, Vili, and Ve. The first child was a snake, Jormungandr. The second child was a girl, Hel. The third child was a wolf, Fenrir. For a time, these children grew in the iron wood, hidden from the sight of the gods. They played among the rusting leaves. They were nursed on the milk of wolves and the venom of the earth. But you cannot hide monsters of this magnitude forever. Odin, sitting on his high throne Hlidskjalf, looked out across the worlds. His one eye, sharpened by the sacrifice at Mimir's well, pierced the gloom of Jotunheim. He saw them. He saw the serpent coiling around the roots of the iron trees. He saw the girl standing half in the shadow, half in the light. He saw the wolf growing larger with every meal, and he felt a chill in his bones. He consulted the prophecies. The Norns whispered to him from the well of Urd. "These children," they said, "will be your ruin. They are the kin of the enemy. They are the vengeance of Ymir." Odin did not hesitate. He gathered the gods, Thor, Tyr, Heimdall, Frey. "We must go," Odin said. "We must take them before they are fully grown." The gods descended. They rode their horses over the Bifrost, sparks flying from the hooves. They crossed the dark fields of Midgard. They entered the iron wood. Angerboda stood before her children. She raged. She cursed. She called upon the ancient magic of the giants. But even she could not stand against the combined might of the Aesir. The gods seized the children. They bound them and brought them back to Asgard. Imagine the scene in the golden hall of Gladsheim. The gods are gathered in a circle. In the center, terrified and hissing, are the three offspring of Loki. The gods looked at them with disgust, but also with fear. They had to decide what to do. They could not kill them, for to spill blood in the sanctuary of Asgard would be to defile the holy place, and perhaps unleash a curse they could not control. So they decided to banish them, to imprison them in the geography of Ymir's corpse. They looked at the first child, Jormungandr. The serpent was already large, but not yet the world ender. It was black and green, with eyes that burned like cold poison. It spat venom onto the golden floor. Odin grabbed the serpent. He did not speak to it. He walked to the edge of Asgard. He looked down at the deep, dark ocean that encircled the world, the ocean of Ymir's blood. He threw the serpent. Jormungandr fell. It fell through the air, twisting and turning, until it hit the water with a massive splash. It sank into the cold depths. But the ocean did not kill it. The ocean was its element. The blood of the giant welcomed the child of chaos. In the deep pressure of the abyss, the serpent began to grow. It ate the whales. It ate the krakens. It grew longer and longer. It grew until it encircled the entire continent of Midgard. It grew until its head met its own tail. It bit onto its tail. The Ouroboros, the world circler. By binding its own tail, the serpent became the belt of the world. It held the ocean together. Its massive body created the tension that kept the tectonic plates in place. The gods had tried to discard it, but they had inadvertently made it a structural component of the planet. It lay there in the darkness, waiting, its yellow eyes watching the ships of men, its mind filled with a slow, cold hatred for the thunder god who would one day try to fish it out. The gods then turned to the second child, Hel. She was perhaps the most disturbing of the three. She was humanoid, but she was a living dichotomy. On one side, her skin was pink and alive, the color of flesh. On the other side, she was blue-black, the color of a corpse that has been in the water too long. She was half living, half rotting. Her face was a map of mortality. She stood before Odin, silent, her head bowed. She did not rage like her mother. She simply waited. Odin looked at her. He saw that she did not belong in the light. She was a creature of entropy. She was the personification of the decay that happens to all biological things. "You cannot stay here," Odin said. "The light of the sun hurts you. The joy of Valhalla mocks you." He did not throw her into the sea. He threw her down. He cast her into Niflheim, the world of mist, the deepest, coldest, darkest realm at the roots of the World Tree. "I give you authority," Odin declared. "I give you a kingdom. You shall rule over the 9 worlds of the dead. You shall take those who die of sickness and old age. You shall take the cowards and the weak. You shall be their queen." Hel accepted this judgment. She descended into the dark. She built her hall there. It is called El-Judnir, the rain damp. Listen to the names of her court. They are the inventory of suffering. Her plate is called hunger. Her knife is called famine. Her bed is called sickness. Her threshold is called stumbling block. Her curtains are called gleaming bale. She sits on a throne of ice, ruling over the pale, shivering ghosts of the unworthy dead. She is the caretaker of the broken. She gathers the souls that the war gods reject. And in the silence of Niflheim, she nurses a cold resentment. She remembers the golden light of Asgard that cast her out. She waits for the day when the gates of hell will open, and her army of the dead will march up the rainbow bridge. Then there was the third child, Fenrir, the wolf. When the gods brought him to Asgard, he was just a pup. He looked like a normal wolf, perhaps a bit larger, with intelligent eyes. The gods did not banish him, not yet. Perhaps they thought they could tame him. Perhaps Odin, in his hubris, thought that if they raised the beast in the halls of the Aesir, they could turn the enemy into an ally, a watchdog for the gods. So they kept him. Fenrir lived in Asgard. He ran through the fields of Idavol, but he grew. He grew at an impossible rate. Every day he was larger. Every day his teeth were sharper. Every day his eyes became more intelligent and more malevolent. He roamed the halls, a massive shadow stalking the gods. He did not bark. He watched. The gods began to fear him. They stopped feeding him. Only Tyr, the god of justice, the bravest of them all, dared to approach the wolf. Tyr would bring him great haunches of meat. Fenrir would eat them in a single bite, snapping the bones like twigs, his yellow eyes fixed on Tyr's hand. The gods held a council. "He is too big," they whispered. "The prophecies say he will swallow the sun. He will swallow Odin. We cannot let him run free." They decided to bind him, but they could not just use force. Fenrir was already stronger than any god. They had to use trickery. They forged a chain. It was made of heavy iron links. They called it lading. They approached the wolf. "Fenrir," they said, playing a game. "You are strong. But how strong? We bet you cannot break this chain." Fenrir looked at the chain. He sniffed it. He knew he could break it. He wanted the fame. He wanted to show them his power. "Put it on me," the wolf growled. They wrapped the heavy iron around his legs. They padlocked it. Fenrir stood up. He stretched. He flexed his massive shoulders. Snap! The iron shattered like glass. The gods gasped. Fenrir laughed. "Is that all?" The gods went back to the forge. They worked harder. They made a second chain, twice as heavy, twice as thick. They tempered it with magic. They called it Dromi. "Try this one," they said. "If you break this, your fame will ring through all the worlds." Fenrir looked at Dromi. It was heavy. He hesitated. But he looked at the gods, and he saw their fear. He knew that to rule them, he had to prove he was unbreakable, and he felt the power of the giant blood surging in his veins. "Bind me," he said. They bound him. The chain was so heavy it sank into the ground. Fenrir shook. He thrashed. He kicked. He roared. The chain held for a second. Then, crack! Shrapnel flew across Asgard. Dromi was dust. Now the gods were terrified. Iron could not hold him. Steel could not hold him. The physical world, the material of Ymir's blood and bones, was not strong enough to contain Ymir's vengeance. Odin knew he needed help. He sent a messenger, Skirnir, down to Svartalfheim, down to the maggots, down to the dwarves. "We need a fetter," the messenger said. "Not of metal, something stronger." The dwarves, the masters of the impossible, accepted the challenge. They did not go to the anvil. They went to the edges of reality. They gathered the ingredients we spoke of earlier: the sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, the spittle of a bird. They wove these non-existent things together. They created a ribbon. It was smooth, soft, and silky. It looked like a piece of decorative lace. They called it Gleipnir. The gods took the ribbon and called Fenrir. They went to an island called Lyngvi in the middle of a dark lake. "Fenrir," they said, "you have broken iron, but can you break this little ribbon?" Fenrir looked at the silk. He looked at the smiling faces of the gods, and for the first time, the wolf felt a trap. "This ribbon looks weak," Fenrir growled, "but there is magic in it. There is trickery. If I break it, I get no glory. It is just a ribbon. If I cannot break it, I am trapped. I will not wear it." "Are you afraid?" the gods taunted. "The great wolf, afraid of a piece of silk." Fenrir's hackles rose. "I am not afraid, but I do not trust you. I will let you bind me on one condition. One of you must place your hand in my mouth as a pledge of good faith. If you do not release me, I will bite off the hand." Silence fell over the gods. They looked at each other. They knew the ribbon would hold. They knew they had no intention of releasing him. To put a hand in that mouth was to lose it. Odin looked away. Thor gripped his hammer. None moved. Then Tyr stepped forward. Tyr, the foster father of the wolf. Tyr, the only one who had fed him. He walked up to the massive beast. He looked into the yellow eyes. He saw the betrayal there. He knew that by doing this, he was breaking the trust of the creature he had cared for. But he also knew the duty to the cosmos. Tyr raised his right hand, his sword hand. He placed it slowly between the massive jaws of the wolf. The fangs were like daggers, dripping with saliva. "Bind me," Fenrir said, his voice muffled by the god's arm. The gods wrapped Gleipnir around the wolf's legs. They tied the knots. Fenrir began to struggle. He pulled, he jerked, but the ribbon did not break. It tightened. The harder he fought, the harder the magic bit into his flesh. It was soft, but it was absolute. The paradox held him. Fenrir realized he was trapped. He looked at the gods. They were laughing. They were cheering. All except Tyr. Fenrir looked at Tyr. Tyr looked at Fenrir. There was a moment of profound sadness. The breaking of the bond between man and beast. The wolf bit down. Crunch. Tyr did not scream. He simply pulled back his stump. The hand was gone, swallowed by the darkness of the wolf's gullet. The sacrifice was made. Order was bought with mutilation. The gods took the end of the ribbon, passed it through a massive stone slab, and buried the slab deep in the earth. They took a sword and thrust it into Fenrir's mouth, wedging his jaws open so he could not bite again. The wolf howled. It was a howl of betrayal, a howl of pain, a howl that shook the mountains. Foam ran from his mouth, forming a river called Von. Expectation. Why expectation? Because he is waiting. He lies there, bound, gagged, bleeding, but he is growing. He is waiting for the end of time. He is waiting for the ribbon to fray. And so the three children were dealt with. The serpent in the sea, the queen in the dark, the wolf on the island. The gods dusted their hands. They returned to their halls. They thought they were safe. They thought they had solved the problem of the iron wood, but they had not solved it. They had merely delayed it. By binding the chaos, they had created a pressure cooker. The serpent was agitating the ocean, eroding the shores. The queen was filling the underworld with an army of the disgruntled dead. The wolf was fueling his rage, growing stronger on a diet of hate. And they had lost something, too. Tyr had lost his hand, the symbol of justice. The gods had proven they were oath breakers. They had lied to the wolf. In doing so, they had stained their own honor. They had introduced deceit into the very foundation of their rule. The Golden Age was definitively over. The age of oaths broken, and brothers fighting had begun. Odin returned to Hlidskjalf. He sat down. He looked at the world he had built from Ymir's corpse. He saw the cracks appearing in the earth. He saw the leaves of Yggdrasil turning yellow. He knew that the maintenance was failing. The Norns could not plaster the mud fast enough. The dragon Nidhogr was chewing faster, and in the distance, beyond the stars, he could feel the presence of Surt. The fire giant was stirring. The cycle was turning towards its inevitable conclusion. The saga of Ymir is not just a story of the past. It is a story of the ticking clock. The gods had built a world out of a murder. They had sustained it with lies, and now the victim was coming to collect the debt. But before the end, there was life. There was the daily struggle of the humans in Midgard. There were the winters that grew longer. There were the summers that grew shorter. The sun, Sol, drove her chariot frantically across the sky, pursued by the wolf shoal. She knew she was running on borrowed time. And deep in the earth, the bound Loki, who would eventually be captured and tied with the guts of his own son, writhed in pain as venom dripped onto his face. Every time he shuddered, the earth shook. These earthquakes were the reminders. The giant is not dead. The giant is merely waiting. We are now approaching the twilight. The shadows are long, the air is cold. The Fimbul winter is coming. In the final chapter of our saga, we will witness the undoing. We will see the knots untie. We will see the brothers of the wolf and the serpent rise. We will see the sky skull crack open. We will watch the world return to the silence of Ginnungagap. But we will also see the hope that lies on the other side of destruction. Prepare yourself. The final battle is at hand. The horn of Heimdall is about to blow. The silence of the grave is not empty. It is waiting. We have walked the long road of the Ymir saga. We have seen the birth of the giant in the frozen void. We have seen the milk of the great cow. We have witnessed the first murder, the great butchery, and the crafting of the cosmos from the wet, heavy meat of the Ancestor. We have seen the Golden Age rise and fall, and the binding of the monsters in the dark places of the earth. Now, we stand at the end of the line. The prophecy of the Volva, the seeress, hangs over the world like a shroud. Brothers shall fight and fell each other, she whispers. Axe time, sword time, shields are sundered. Wind time, wolf time, ere the world falls. This is the Fimbul winter, the great winter. It begins not with a storm, but with a stillness. The sun, Sol, grows pale. She is tired. The wolves that chase her are getting closer, their hot breath fogging the rear of her chariot. The warmth of the stolen sparks of Muspelheim begins to fade. The earth, the flesh of Ymir, grows hard. The soil freezes to the depth of the bedrock. The worms and the dwarves stop their digging. The ground is too tough even for them. The trees, the hair of Ymir, turn brittle. They do not bend in the wind anymore. They snap. The sound of the forest is the sound of bones breaking. For 3 years, there is no summer. There is no harvest. The gift cycle between gods and men breaks down because men have nothing left to give. The blood sacrifices stop. The altars go cold. And when the feeding stops, the gods weaken. This is the rigor mortis of the world. Ymir is waking up, not as a living being, but as a geological force. The tectonic plates, which were riveted together by the dwarves, begin to pull apart. The mountains, the great femurs and ribs, begin to crack. The sky, the skull, begins to fracture. And then the sound comes. It starts low, a vibration in the soles of your feet. It is the sound of the dragon Nidhogr finally chewing through the root. The World Tree Yggdrasil shudders. The ash leaves fall like gray snow. The axis of the universe tilts. High above, at the Himmelbjörg, the cliffs of heaven, the watchman stands up. Heimdall. He sees the dust rising in the east. He sees the shadows lengthening. He lifts the Gjallarhorn to his lips. He blows. The sound is not a musical note. It is a scream made of brass. It echoes through the 9 worlds. It wakes the Einherjar in Valhalla. It wakes the dead in Hell. It wakes the giants in Jotunheim. The vibration of the horn hits the sky skull. The dome rings like a struck bell. The catastrophic unmaking has begun. The first thing to go is the bond of the wolf. The magic ribbon, Gleipnir, made of impossible things, finally unravels. The paradox fails. Reality reasserts itself. Fenrir shakes his massive head. The ribbon snaps. He is free. He opens his mouth. His lower jaw touches the earth. His upper jaw touches the sky. He is vast. He is the devouring void returned. He swallows the air. He swallows the birds. And then, with a final snapping lunge, he catches her. Sol, the sun. The light goes out. The sparks of Muspelheim that Odin had hammered into the skull sky are shaken loose. The stars fall. It is a rain of dying fire. The constellations disintegrate. The guidance of the sailors is gone. The world is plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. Then, the ocean rises. Jormungandr, the world serpent, releases his tail. The belt of the world is undone. He thrashes towards the land. The ocean, the blood of Ymir, boils. It surges over the eyebrows of the giant, the fortifications of Midgard. The salt water drowns the forests. The cliffs crumble. And on the floodwaters, a ship appears. Naglfar. This is the ship of nails. It is made from the untrimmed fingernails and toenails of dead men. For eons, the Norse people trimmed their nails so as not to contribute to this vessel. But there were always those who forgot. There were always the unburied dead. The ship is white and bony. It is steered by the giant Hrymr. It is filled with the frost giants, the Rime Thursar. They are returning. The children of Bergelmir, the survivors of the first flood, are coming to reclaim their inheritance. But they are not alone. From the south, the sky tears open. The fire returns. Surt moves. The guardian of Muspelheim, who has stood still since before the creation of the world, finally steps forward. He raises his sword. It shines brighter than the sun ever did. He leads the sons of Muspel. They are beings of pure light and heat. They ride across the void. They reach the Bifrost, the Rainbow Bridge. They ride onto it. The bridge, which was built to hold the weight of gods, cannot hold the weight of the apocalypse. It glows white-hot. It cracks. It shatters. The connection between the divine and the mortal is severed. The bridge falls into the abyss. The armies gather on the field of Vigrid, a plain that stretches 100 leagues in every direction. This is the killing floor. Odin rides out. He wears his golden helmet and his blue cloak. He holds Gungnir, the spear. He is not fighting for victory. He knows the prophecy. He is fighting for dignity. He rides straight at the wolf. The wolf opens its maw. There is no epic duel here. There is only the inevitability of nature. Entropy swallows wisdom. Odin, the All-Father, the architect, is consumed. The mind of the world is gone. Thor fights the serpent. We have spoken of this. He kills the beast, crushing its skull, but he dies from the poison. The protector of the world is dissolved by the venom of the chaos. Frey fights Surt. He has no sword, having given it away for love. He fights with a stag's antler. He falls. The fertility of the world is burned to ash. And then Surt flings fire over the earth. This is the moment of the great cremation. The fire of Surt is not just a forest fire. It is an elemental dissolution. It burns the trees, hair. It melts the stones, bones. It boils the sea, blood. The body of Ymir is being cremated. The structure that the gods built, the careful separation of earth, air, fire, and water, is undone. The solids turn to liquids. The liquids turn to gas. The gas turns to plasma. The sky skull, heated beyond endurance, finally shatters. The shards of the dome fall into the boiling soup of the world. The earth sinks into the sea. Silence returns. It is the silence of Ginnungagap once more. The wind has stopped because there is no atmosphere. The fire has died down because there is nothing left to burn. The waters are dark and still. Is this the end? In the linear view of time, yes. But the Norse view of time is not a line. It is a wheel. The darkness lasts for an age. We do not know how long. Time has no meaning without the sun to measure it. But deep in the ocean, in the solution of the destroyed world, the iter is still there. The yeast is still there. The memory of the form is still there. Slowly the waters recede. A new earth rises. It is green. It is fresh. It is purified by the fire. The waterfalls tumble down the new mountains. The eagle flies over the fjord, hunting for fish. The sun has a daughter. Before she was eaten, Sol gave birth to a daughter no less fair than herself. This new sun rises, casting a gentle morning light over the healed world. And there are survivors, not the old gods. They are part of the old cycle. They are the guilt bearers. They had to die with their mistakes. But their children survive. Vidar, who avenged Odin, and Vali. Modi and Magni, the sons of Thor, who carry the hammer Mjolnir. Balder, the bright god who was killed by mistletoe, returns from hell. He walks hand in hand with Hoder, his blind brother who killed him. The victim and the murderer are reconciled. They meet on the field of Idavol. The grass is tall and green. There are no halls of gold yet. There are no walls. They sit down in the grass. They talk. They speak of the old days. They speak of the wolf and the serpent as if they were bad dreams. And then, in the grass, they find something, glittering in the morning light. The golden tables, the chess pieces of the Aesir. They were lost in the grass at the beginning of time, when the Golden Age ended. Now they are found. The game is ready to be played again. The gods pick up the pieces. They set the board. And under the earth, in the new roots of the new tree, perhaps a new dragon is already beginning to hatch. Perhaps the cycle is starting all over again. But let us step back from the narrative now. Let us step out of the myth and look at the structure of this story. Why does it haunt us? Why is the image of the dismembered giant so powerful? This motif, the anthropocosmos, human universe, is not unique to the Norse. It is one of the oldest ideas in the Indo-European consciousness. In the Rig Veda of ancient India, we find the hymn of Purusha. Purusha is the cosmic man. He has 1,000 heads, 1,000 eyes, 1,000 feet. The gods sacrifice him. From his mind, the moon was born. From his eye, the sun was born. From his mouth, the Indra and Agni. From his breath, the wind. From his navel, the atmosphere. From his head, the sky. From his feet, the earth. It is the exact same blueprint. The sacrifice of the primal being creates the categories of existence. In Babylon, we have the story of Tiamat, the dragon mother of chaos. Marduk kills her. He slices her corpse in half like a dried fish. One half becomes the sky, the other half the earth. Her weeping eyes become the sources of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. In China, we have Pangu. He sleeps in an egg for 18,000 years. When he breaks out, he separates the sky and earth. When he dies, his breath becomes the wind, his voice the thunder, his left eye the sun, his right eye the moon, his blood the rivers, his muscles the fertile land, his facial hair the stars, his fur the bushes and forests, his bones the minerals, his sweat the rain. And the parasites on his body? They become humans. This story is universal. Why? Because it answers the fundamental trauma of existence. We know that in order to live, we must consume. To build a house, we must cut a tree. To eat, we must kill a plant or an animal. To create civilization, we must repress the wild. The myth of Ymir tells us that the universe itself is a crime scene. It tells us that order is not natural. Chaos is natural. Order is something that is imposed by violence and maintained by vigilance. The walls of Midgard do not stand up by themselves. They must be built. The sun does not stay in the sky by itself. It must be driven. It is a philosophy of hard realism. It does not promise a paradise of eternal peace. It promises a struggle. It promises a Fimbul winter. But it also promises that the struggle is worth it, even if the gods die, even if the sun is eaten. The green earth will rise again. The game pieces will be found. The memory will survive. The figure of Ymir is the ultimate tragedy. He is the father of everything, yet he is the enemy of everything. He is the ground we walk on, yet he tries to shake us off. We, the humans, are caught in this tension. We are made of the driftwood, spirit/form, but we live on the corpse, matter/substance. We are torn between the desire for order, Odin, and the pull of the chaos, Ymir. This is why the myth resonates. It is not just a story about giants and hammers. It is a story about the human condition. So, the next time you hear the wind howling around the eaves of your house, do not just think of air pressure. Think of the giant's breath. The next time you see a mountain range jagged against the sunset, do not just think of geology. Think of the broken bones of the Ancestor. The next time you look at the ocean, dark and deep, think of the blood that binds the world. We are walking on a history that is older than time. We are living in a borrowed house, and though the roof may one day crack, and though the walls may one day fall, for now, the fire is warm, the walls are thick, and the story is still being told. Thank you for listening to Hearths of Myths. We have journeyed together from the silence of the void to the roar of Ragnarok and back to the silence of the green fields. We have dissected the giant and built a world. If you found value in this saga, if you felt the chill of the rime ice and the heat of the forge, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. It helps us keep the fire burning in the long winter nights. There are many more stories to tell. Stories of the heroes who walked this earth. Stories of the strange creatures that dwell in the hidden places. And stories of the gods who watch over us. Until next time, may your roots go deep, may your walls stand strong, and may you always find the golden pieces in the grass. Sleep well.